Do we call that the cold open? Brrr. Well, good morning. I'll just take over then for Mr. Big Voice, if that be the case. Bill Colley with you this morning on News Radio 1310 KLIX and News Radio 1310.com. And this is Top Story. For the next couple of hours, you'll be listening to, call it self-righteous, God-fearing pomposity. I got up this morning dark and early, as I always do on work days, and I had a chance to sit down, and while I was drinking my morning coffee, I noticed I had something called a Google alert, and that is when your name appears somewhere online, Google will actually, if you sign up for these, it was Ann Coulter actually who got me started with that. I was talking with her doing an interview many, many years ago, and I told her that some liberals were calling my radio show in advance of an appearance she was making and saying, I don't want you to put that woman on the air because we don't think people should hear what she has to say. And I said, how did they know that? She said, I announced it on my website, and so they saw it because they have signed up for Google Alerts. And she said, by the way, I'd recommend that you do that too as well. And then you'll know exactly what people are saying about you out there in the ether of the internet. So I did that all the way back in about 2004, 2005, when she told me to take that approach. I got the thing this morning, and there's a letter to the editor of the Times News. The writer is essentially saying, I don't like to read him. You need to fire him right now as a columnist because we can't have that in this community. You know, the guy isn't forced to read the column. He's not forced to listen to talk radio. I realized likely when he was going to school as a kid, and he's still bitter about it, that probably he got a lot of wedgies in the hallway and he was afraid to go to bathroom next to the other boys in the locker room or in the boys' bathroom. He likely got bullied on the playground, and some of those people who took his lunch money are likely still spending it. And he's really angry about that. And he equates that with conservatism, and therefore conservatives must be silent. And then the nitwit goes on to say, I do understand that the radio station makes money off his show, but I don't understand why he's in the paper. Well, maybe because the paper wants to make money too. I've got to tell you right now, nobody in media has set a goal to go broke and out of business. Seems that liberals don't understand that. That's not how business works. And you wouldn't expect them to understand it because, well, they aren't Republicans. They, of course, believe everything out there should be free or is free. So you've got this guy whining about it. But here's the thing. He starts the letter out with this line that he's 39 years old. Oh, wonderful. And that he's lived his entire life in Twin Falls. In other words, this is, whether he knows it or not, he's using a rhetorical device to try to say, I'm from here, I've lived here a long time, and we aren't like that around here. To which I would reply, then how come you can't get any dang Democrats elected to public office? All of you liberals out there who keep claiming we aren't like that around here, what kind of crack are you smoking that clouds your judgment to the point where you don't see the world around you? Now, he may be thinking, I don't know any conservatives, and he likely doesn't have any friends in the first place, so it's a good possibility he believes what he thinks is what the majority thinks. The only way Democrats serve in public office is in Twin Falls is on the city council, which is called nonpartisan. In other words, you don't have to announce you're a Democrat when you're running, which is a good thing for those few Democrats who are serving, because if they had to announce it, they wouldn't get elected. And then when they leave that council and they try and run for public office, or they have their spouses run for public office as Democrats, they get slaughtered by the voters. And we're not talking a literal slaughter. I know right now some liberal blogger out there is saying that I'm recommending we slaughter liberal politicians. Not at all what I said. But the numbers don't back up the fact that these people think that they are somehow representative of the community. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples. I live in the 24th State Legislative District. Lee Hyder is my state senator. Lance Clough is one of my two representatives in the House in Boise. The other is Stephen Harkin. I was being told by folks all over in liberal media over the last several weeks that Hyder was going to lose to Deb Silver, the leader of the Democrats in this county. And then I kept hearing that Catherine, and what is her last name again? She's married to the one counselor. Yeah, Talkington. Yeah, he does bear somewhat of a resemblance to Craig Stadler, right? But she was running as well, and I kept hearing, these are going to be very close elections. And that Jill Schemes, she's really slick when she talks. She's going to beat Jack Johnson. Well, I saw the final polling results, and so did all of you. None of them got close. I mean, it was nowhere near close. They all lost by 20 points or more. Hello? Hello? And by the way, a lot of these Republicans, I'll be honest with you, Jack was on vacation for a while during the campaign season. I saw his pictures on Facebook. And I know that both Hartgen and Clow and even Mr. Hyder as well, they did some campaigning, but they didn't have to overdo it. In a sense, they all coasted, and they still won, not just by double digits, but by 20% or more. Over in the race that we had for the CSI trustee position that was open. Now, Rick Martin lost. He was challenging on the notion that we need to bring an end to this refugee resettlement program until we get it straightened out. But of the 37,000 votes that were cast, I counted this up, nearly 37,000, he only lost by 2,000 votes. And Rick can be somewhat of a prickly personality. In other words, he can turn people off. And yet a lot of people were willing to overlook that. What if somebody had decided to run who had a sunny disposition and was always smiling and taken his very same position? He would have won, or she would have won. And this notion that we aren't those kind of people, I'm sorry, but the numbers don't back up your claims. And if you don't like talk radio, then don't listen to it. If you don't like my newspaper column, then don't read it. But the notion that because you don't like it, you're going to have to deprive everybody else, well, it's the totalitarian impulse among liberals in this country, and they can't get over it. It's why they lost this election, because people finally pushed back, the national election, and it's why they lost a lot of elections. The numbers of Democrats who got elected this year in the state legislature, the Democrats lost 3 seats overall. They didn't have many to lose in the first place. Hello, knock, knock, anybody home? You're not getting this, are you? In a companion to all of this, there's a column today in the Washington Post from the radio announcer and fiction writer Garrison Keillor. He's a flaming liberal. Now, I used to enjoy his storytelling. Then he ran out of ideas, and eventually his show petered out because he would try to rely on singing songs instead of telling stories about his imaginary hometown, and he had an awful voice, and it just turned people off. But he says that Trump voters are going to be disappointed by what happens next, except he doesn't say it all through the entire 2 pages of column exactly what they're going to be disappointed about. But he does say this. The uneducated, in other words, you dumb dummies who aren't as smart as he is, white males who elected him are the vulnerable ones, and they will not like what happens next. Resentment is no excuse for bald-faced stupidity. In other words, you're a dummy because you voted for Donald Trump. And he goes on to say, we all experience cruelty. Here we go again. What really makes the liberals angry is that someone beat the snot out of them on the playground and took their lunch money. You know, when I was a kid, well, I got to admit, I wasn't getting slapped around too much. I was kind of a cipher. Nobody bothered me. I didn't seem to bother anybody else. I went about my business. Got to hang out with my friends at lunch every day. Got to go out on the playground with them and play ball every day. It was a wonderful experience. But I do realize there were some kids who were getting knocked down and their faces rubbed around in the mud, and they had to say uncle, and they lost their lunch money. And yes, it must have been traumatic. But in those rare occasions where I had to encounter some bullies, one time some much older boys in the park who cornered me on a slide and spit on me, and I went home and told my mother, and my mother said, fight your own battles. That's how my parents raised us. You better learn how to be tough. And number 2, don't have any false expectations about what the world is going to deliver. And that was our entire culture that we were raised in. And you know what? Today we have all of these young people. We've told them everything's going to be easy. Don't worry, there's EBT cards. There's home heating assistance. There's rental assistance. Don't worry about it. The Democrat Party will take care of you. Lord forbid we never have to go liberate Europe again and fight an empire in Asia, because these people would be turning tail and running at the first sight of trouble. That's what we have raised in this country, and that's where we are. Mr. Keillor goes on to say, we all experienced cruelty back in our playground days. You see, that's what this is really all about. Boys who beat up on the timid, girls who made fun of the homely and naive, and most of us, to our shame, went along with it, afraid to defend the victims, lest we become one of them. But he says he outgrew it in his 20s. Let the uneducated, he writes, have their day. I am now going to pay more attention to teachers. He references some of his old teachers who fought in Korea and World War II, who he didn't pay attention to when he was younger, albeit he didn't say that they were liberals. He just said that they fought in wars. So what is his point? His point is Donald Trump calls people names. Donald Trump is mean. Therefore, nobody should vote for him because he's mean. Well, think about this for a moment. All of those dumb dummies who voted for Donald Trump and made him the 45th president of the United States. They're looking at their lives and they're struggling to pay a mortgage, a car payment, feed 4 kids who they won't be able to send to college because there won't be any money to do it. They know that when they retire, or if they're forced to retire, they may never be able to retire, or maybe they've already been retired because they can't find a job. They know that there won't be anything left for them when they get to that age where they can no longer work. They also know that Jose, Esteban, and Mohammed have been coming here and taking their jobs. So after years and years and years of working hard and paying taxes and trying to get things for your family so your family could survive when you're no longer here, somebody else, a liberal in your neighborhood, came along and said, "Oh, we aren't that kind of people, so therefore you have to give your job to these outsiders, to these immigrants. They may not be here legally, but they've all agreed to vote for President Obama and Hillary Clinton. Therefore, they're going to stay. But don't worry about it. We'll allow you to shoot up some heroin, so you won't be thinking about your real troubles in life. We'll have plenty of bread and circuses, and when you whiteys all die out, then we'll be able to have the workers' paradise we've always envisioned on the American left." Not one of those dumbass liberals has any consideration for the masses, the 60 million people so far, the votes are still being tallied, who voted for Donald Trump. For all of their yammering about compassion and how they're better human beings and how they got kicked around on the playground by somebody who looked like that white guy who toiled and sweated all of his life until Jose and Esteban and Mohammed took his job, they have no compassion whatsoever because they're still angry about somebody giving them a wedgie when they were in the 7th grade. And the guy who gave them a wedgie happens to look like a working guy. And so they're out for blood, they're out for revenge, and this is why the other side finally pushed back, and Trump is the revenge of the people you are taking revenge upon. Bill Colley this morning with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. Guess what? Al Sharpton was asked by a reporter from TMZ if he's going to be leaving the country now that Donald Trump has been elected.
Now, a lot of celebrities, including yourself, said they were going to move to Canada if he actually won.
All of us said that. That was said in jest. We're not going anywhere. And clearly, what is said in jest, if that's the comfort they got, they might as well get ready for an uncomfortable ride. They rode the herd on President Obama for 8 years. Mr. Trump better saddle up. He's got a lot he's got to deal with. He promised a wall. He promised jobs. He promised he was going to do this, that, and the other. Well, he's going to have to deliver for his crowd while he fights our crowd. His crowd will turn on within 3 months. He can't deliver half of what he said. I guarantee you.
Speaking of the uneducated, the man you just heard, the mushmouth you just heard, is a high school dropout. He basically makes a living from extortion. That's how he gets by. In fact, he lives very well in a penthouse in Manhattan. And when he says, we're going to ride herd, well, Donald Trump has a Republican Congress, Senate and House. And Mr. Sharpton, he can do whatever the heck he pleases to do, and he owes none of you anything because you did nothing for him. Bill Colley with you on Top Story. Perhaps your telephone call is coming up in a few minutes. Short break. It's 36 at 9:20, or excuse me, 8:20. You know, I'm in a hurry to get out of here. Did you see where the pimply-faced 15-year-old looking founder of Grubhub, the CEO of that company, it looks like he's got a size 12 shirt collar. He's now saying he didn't really mean it when he said that anybody who worked for him who voted for Trump should resign immediately. And they claim that Trump's a bully? Holy smokes. Trump's not out racing around the streets, smashing windows, burning things, and looting now, is he? He's not hauling people out of their cars and beating them to near death because they voted for him. No, that's your liberal friends out there who are doing all of that. Lefty is just so blind to his own actions, trying to project them upon everyone else. 824, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, newsradio1310.com. 36. And right now you could give us a call, 736-0300. And I just want to mention Waddell and Reed, who you often hear on this radio station but have joined Top Story. Waddell and Reed has been in the financial planning industry for 8 decades, selling mutual funds, among the first firms in the country to do that. In fact, they sell two. Most firms don't. They won't waste your money. That is, they're not gamblers when it comes to investing. These are people who like to work with you as an individual because they know that everybody is unique and has a unique plan for the day they will be retiring, whether they plan to retire on that day or they have to perhaps retire earlier. They help you manage the money, and they also take the planning personally. You're a friend to them. You're someone that they'd like to please. We have a caller looking to join us, and first caller of the morning, you're on the air on Top Story on KLIX.
Good morning, Bill. It's the liberals. It's their way or the highway, and then when they lose, they're poor losers. The constitutional conservatives. Unfortunately, we just sit back and kind of lick our wounds, and we do our best. But it really, all of these young people out in the street in Portland, especially in other places where they're beating, tearing up property and destroying things. It's just incredible. This comes through our.
Am I being told that they're funded by George Soros? So he is actually funding this destruction.
Right, and so, like I say, with George Soros in there, I mean, it's really actually showing what they're all about. And we've all been on O'Reilly. I think he had a couple people on their students. They're conservative at Yale, I believe it was, or Columbia, and they indicated how they get persecuted for being conservative. Like I say, the liberals. It's their way, the highway, and the message now is that Trump needs to just put forth his agenda, and Congress just pass the laws, and he can sign them and do away with those executive orders and so forth. But I got a letter from Senator Risch about the arsenic thing here in Filer. All they work about. We're going to lower the arsenic level 1 part per billion at a cost of $6.1 million, but they don't get it. The EPA, there's no science behind it, and so we just say, well, we'll get some public funding to help you out.
Well,
they don't get it, and so this is the problem. If they just go along with these bureaucrats until they stop funding these things. But Trump has a tremendous agenda. If he takes that thing, this country it'll be like a breath of fresh air to get rid of all of these bureaucrats that are ruining our country and our economy. And it won't take long to turn this thing around, but we've got to stop this Trans-Pacific Partnership thing.
Right.
And I can't get Risch to make a comment on that either.
All right. I thank you for the call. Adrian's a chemist, and I know he wants to host the show today, but I do have to get to some other callers and to some other business. He's right about this when he talks about the arsenic, because as a PhD with a chemistry background, he knows more than the politicians. Too often, politicians come in and they do a local town hall meeting. I saw this happen one time, actually, with a Republican congressman who was a very conservative congressman at the time. This was 15, 20, maybe 25 years ago, at a town hall meeting, and someone stood up and he said, "Oh, well, we could create a program for that." Well, we don't need any more programs. We need to get the government off our backs. This was a rebellion against the EPA and its ilk. It really was. You think about that for a moment. This was a rebellion against government trying to tell the rest of us what we need to do with our lives. And it just doesn't sink in with these, we could get a program for that, because they're thinking, I'll get that guy's vote. Well, in the long run, let's stop and think about what all of these regulations mean. If you ever saw the movie Brazil, made in the 1980s, it shows you what the bureaucracy gone wild will really look like. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Colder weather on the way. I know I'm sounding like a broken record when I say that, and I know I date myself when I say that. And even though what we've seen is, I guess, unseasonably warm for Idaho in November, yes, we will see some colder weather, and that means you're going to have to flip the furnace on at some point. And if it's not performing the way you want it to, or not performing at all, you need to call the pros at Ramsey Heating and Electric. The pros at Ramsey Heating and Electric will come out, get the job done right, and make sure it's done right the first time. Problem-free, cozy winters are found at Ramsey Heating and Electric, 2600 Overland Avenue in Burley. Telephone number is 678-0459. Ramsey Heating and Electric, where they sell warm winters. and cool summers. More of your telephone calls on the way in just a couple of minutes. It's 8:37. Bill Colley with you this morning on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Will the media have a self-assessment and change its evil ways? Details coming up. I just was taking a quick look at the calendar. Christmas in the nighttime sky is 2 weeks from today. We'll all be out there freezing. Last year we called it frozen fireworks, but we'll be looking forward to seeing all of you out there when that event comes up. Thanksgiving less than 2 weeks away. That came up fast. And with all of these types of holiday activities going on, if you're struggling actually with your hearing, you need a way to remedy that because you don't want to be left out of all of the good times that the family has. It's very difficult to be left alone in the corner when you can't hear what's being said. You need to drop by and see Dr. Christine Pickup, a doctor of audiology at Mount Harrison Audiology in Rupert. You can call Mount Harrison Audiology today and find solutions for your hearing loss and be ready to enjoy all the fun of those gatherings and special moments that you'll have with your loved ones. Schedule your hearing health checkup, 312-0957. Life is worth hearing, she reminds you. That number once more, 312-0957. Telephone number to reach Top Story and Bill Colley this morning is 736-0300, 736-0300. And we have a caller with us. Caller, you're up next. You're on the air.
Oh, hi, Bill. My dad's uncle had a favorite phrase that I kept hearing. He said a lot of college graduates he came across were overeducated and underbrained.
I've met more than a few.
That would apply to George Soros, because all he's doing is hastening the demise of the Democratic Party with his contributions.
And he won't be with us a whole heck of a lot longer. Thank you much for the call. I didn't know that was coming to an end. George Soros, we're not praying for anything, obviously, but he is ancient by some standards, and at some, unless, of course, his boss says to him, I'll give you another 50 years to do my dirty work. And you'll still have to shovel the coal for a hot reception, but don't worry. You got a little bit more time. 8:35, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. You're up next. You're on the air.
Yeah, hey, I don't know if you've talked about it, but the picture of the White House staff waiting for Trump to come, I thought it was a joke. I thought it was something that was been propped up, but it was real. Those people looked like they were witnessing the devil entering their, what they thought was theirs for life, I guess. And, I would think that the rats are scurrying for the holes because if Mr. Trump wants to run things, like he says, ahead of schedule and below budget, I think there's going to be a lot of bureaucrats losing their jobs. And won't it be a great thing? Thanks, Bill.
Thank you. They can all go out to West Virginia and shoot up heroin, too. That's what they think the rest of us are doing when we lose our jobs. That's how they look at us. I saw that photograph, and James Robbins, who used to write for the Washington Times, and it is a small world. James is a friend of mine. He grew up on the Eastern Shore, and of course I knew lots of mutual friends, and that's how we got to be friends when I actually lived there. He posted that picture yesterday, and then a number of people said, no, this is a week-old picture. Well, it was similar to some other pictures of the White House staff outside. But no, this was actually a new picture that was making the rounds. There was one woman standing in the background. It reminds me, that video of from the movie of Adolf Hitler. People take it and they always put their own lines in there, their own translations about what's going on for all these sorts of scenarios. There's a woman who breaks down and she's crying in the hallway in that movie, and they try to calm her down. That's what that reminded me of, and you could tell they were definitely heartbroken. Will Ron, who works for CBS News, is annoying his fellow travelers in media because, well, he's not one. If you recognize the last name, his father, Richard W. Ron, longtime economist and a longtime syndicated newspaper columnist, and Will's mother is Peggy Noonan, also syndicated newspaper columnist and one-time speechwriter for Ronald Reagan. Will Ron has this that appeared at the CBS News website. The mood in the Washington press corps is bleak, and deservedly so. The audience for our glib analysis and contempt for much of the electorate, it turned out, was limited. Journalists love mocking Trump supporters, and then he goes into some examples. I'm going to jump down here, though, and tell you he writes this. There's been some sympathy from the press, sure. The dispatches from heroin country that read like reports from colonial administrators checking in on the natives. But much of that starts from the assumption that Trump voters are backward and that it's our duty to catalog and ultimately reverse that backwardness. Trump voters are racist and sexist, we believe, so there must be more racists and sexists that are actually out there than we realized after Election Day. The idea, he writes, that if we mock them enough, call them racist enough, they'll eventually shut up and get in line. And he says this, too, as well. He says, we don't make much of an effort to really understand, and with too few exceptions, treat the economic grievances of middle America like they're some sort of punchline. Sometimes quite literally so, such as when reporters tweet out a photo of racist-looking Trump supporters and jokingly suggest that they must be upset about free trade or low wages. We have to fix this, he says, and the broken reasoning behind it. There's a fleeting fun to gang-ups and groupthink, but it's not worth what we are losing in the process. That is, the American people don't have faith in the media any longer. Well, they didn't really going into this, but whatever little faith may have been left, gone now. We've got more on that subject, in fact, in just a few minutes. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and NewsRadio1310.com. Some gun talk coming up a little later this morning. Got a couple of folks coming in, as we do every Friday morning, talk about firearms, the Second Amendment, and gun safety as well. All of that's ahead.